So here's the project we're going to create today. I've got a Windows form with 52 labels which represent the cards of a card deck. I can click the Shuffle Deck and it's going to show me all 52 cards. It's going to randomly position these. And I can reshuffle this deck anytime I want. Or I can clear the deck and go back to the back of the card. As I've shuffled the deck, I can click on a card. So in this case, I'm going to click on the Jack of Hearts. And it tells me you clicked the Jack of Hearts. If I click the Queen of Spades, you clicked the Queen of Spades. The Ace of Diamonds, the Three of Clubs. And if I shuffle the deck, of course, it's going to work on whatever card I'm clicking on. Ace of Hearts. Queen of Spades now is down here. So we're going to look at how we created this project. We're going to use some arrays. We're going to use an object array as well as a Boolean array. The object array will allow us to process all the cards, and the Boolean array will allow us to keep track of which cards have been used so that there are no duplicates. No card is used more than once. To start the project, we're going to need some assets for our application, and that is the images of all the cards and the back of the card. And I've created a zip file and placed it into our Canvas course. So once you log in, just go to Modules, and we're going to scroll down. We're going to scroll down to week 4 on the repetition structures, and at the bottom of that you will see cards.zip. You can click on that and then download it. Once you download that, then you're going to want to open it, and you're going to want to extract all these files. And I'm going to place them in my thumb drive. Creating a new folder. Just going to call it Cards. Select that folder and we'll extract. So the important thing is remember where these cards are. We're going to import those into our project. The cards were exported out of Photoshop, and so as different layers. And the first one is the back of the card, that's 0, and then 0001. You notice it's an underscore S2, that's the 2 of spades, the 3 of spades, and so forth. So we have all the spades going down from the 2 to the ace. Then we have the hearts from 2 to the ace of hearts, and the diamonds from 2 to ace, and then finally the clubs from 2 to ace. I can right click on any one of these. This is the 10 of hearts. I'm going to choose properties, and in the properties window I'm going to go to details, and I can see that each image is 140 by 194. I think in the interest of space we'll probably do a quarter size of these, so we're going to make our images basically as 70 by 98. So remember those numbers, 70 by 98. I'm going to cancel. I'm going to go into Visual Studio now. In Visual Studio, I've created a new project as a Windows Form C# project. I gave it a name of Card Shuffle. And then in the IDE, I changed the text to my Form 1 to be Card Shuffle. I'm going to bring the properties up over here so we can kind of zoom in just on our interface and be able to see the properties. I'm going to change the back color property of Form 1. I'm going to make it green. And then I want to bring in all those images that we downloaded from Canvas and put those in an image list. So in the toolbox, I'm going to go to the components area and grab the image list component or control and drag it to my form. It's going to put it down here on the system tray. I'm going to name this image list IMG cards. I'm going to set the bit depth to 32-bit. That'll give us an alpha channel. I think these are all JPEGs, as I recall, so 24-bit would probably be sufficient, but these are small images, so not a big deal. I'm going to set the size of these. Remember that number I told you to remember? It was 70, 98. We're going to reduce these down to quarter size of the original images. And then I'm ready to choose my collection. So I'm going to open up the collection. I'm going to click on Add, and I'm going to go find those images that I saved on my thumb drive in a folder called Cards. And there's the images. I'm going to select the first one, go down to the bottom one, hold down the Shift key and click. That'll select them all, and I'm going to say Open. And there they are. And they come in that order. So the very first one is the back, 0, and then 2 of spades, 3 of spades, and so forth down to the ace. We have all the hearts. We have all the diamonds, 2 to ace, and the clubs, 2 to ace. I'm going to say OK. So now I've imported my images. I want to create a label on our screen for the first card. So I'm going to go to the label. Just going to drag the label onto the screen. I'm going to set the auto size property to false, the back color to white. I'm going to give it a border style of fixed single. I'm going to get rid of the text, and I want to set the size to, you may have already guessed, 70,98. So there's our first card. I'm going to do two more things of this. I'm going to take this card, and we're going to go to the image list and link it to our IMG cards, and then we're going to set the image index to index 0. That's going to be our card back. So there's our first card. I'm going to select it, copy, and paste. Our second card. I'm going to select those two, paste. Now we have 4 cards. Select those, copy, paste. We have 8 cards. I want to have a row of 10, so I'm going to select those 2 cards and copy. And that basically gives me 10. I'm going to move this last one over a little bit. I'm going to select all 10 of those. And let's go up to our alignment bar, and we're going to set the horizontal spacing to be equal in all these. And just to make sure that these are all basically aligned to the top, I'll choose Align Top. So we have a little bit of space between each card. That looks great. That gives us 10 cards. Now I'm going to copy that row. I'm going to bring these up. I'm going to allow them to overlap a little bit. I'm going to paste a third row. And this row I'll bring back up over here. Paste a fourth row. A fifth row. And I want 2 more cards, so I'm just going to select these last 2, copy, and paste. I have a total of 52 cards. I'm not going to bother to name any of these. We're going to let Visual Studio take care of that for us. We're just going to use the default names of label 1 through label 52. We'll put those into an object array, and then we're just going to refer to the object array. What I do want to add is a button, and the text of that button is going to be Shuffle Deck. And I'll copy that button, paste a second one. This one will be Clear Deck. That is my interface. I'm going to code the Shuffle Deck button. Bring my properties back down and dock it. Okay, we're going to use 2 arrays in this project. So up here at the top, they're going to be class level arrays. I'm going to create a label array that I will name my cards. It's going to equal a new label array of size 52. So I have 52 cards on my screen. So this will contain all those labels. Now remember, we cannot populate this array because those labels currently do not exist with this line of code. They don't exist until the form has been loaded or the components initialized. I want another array of type bool, a Boolean array. And we're going to use this to keep track of which cards have been used. So we're going to say, we're going to call it card used. It's going to equal a new Boolean array. I'm going to make this one type 53 because my index numbers of the cards really go from 1 to 52. So I want my Boolean array to go from 0 to 52 rather than 0 to 51. And we'll treat that 0 really as the back of the card, and then my 52 cards. Okay, so that is our two arrays that we're going to use in this project to make sure we don't get any duplicates of cards. We saw in the previous video on the object arrays that we could do this a couple different ways. We could create a for each loop that would go through all of our components and add the labels to a temporary label array, and then use a for loop to put each of those labels into the class level label of my cards. So you can refer back to video 6F, I think it was, on object arrays and see how I would do that. I want to show you another little trick here though, and that is to use Excel to create our code. So I have Excel here. In cell A2, I'm going to type label 1. That was our first label that we created, that very first card. I'm going to grab the fill box in the bottom right hand corner of that cell. I'm going to drag down, and I basically want to get to label 52. I'm just watching the tooltip. Line 53, I get label 52. So there are my 52 labels in Excel. In cell B1, I want to create a label array in C#. So I'm going to start that first line of code as label. I'm just going to call this temp cards equals. We're going to use our curly bracket to populate it. I'm going to leave it at that. And then in the next cell, B2, we're going to say this equals B1 ampersand A2 ampersand quote comma space quote. And that gives me LBL temp cards equals curly bracket label 1. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to fill it down to my label 52 cell, to the opposite of that, and it basically builds this line of code of all these label names. Now that bottom cell is a formula. It's equals B52 and A53 and comma space. By the way, Excel is using Visual Basic for applications, and in Visual Basic, string concatenation is the ampersand rather than the plus sign that we see in C#. I don't want to copy this because I don't want the formula, I want to copy the content. So I'm going to copy this cell, come down to the cell below that, I'm going to right click, and under paste options I want to paste just the values. And then I'm going to take that cell and I'm going to do a Control C to copy and go back to Visual Studio. Now in my initialized component, I'm going to paste in my code, and I'm getting a little error here because the code isn't quite complete. I'm going to scroll down to the back of this, and I want to get rid of that last comma and put a closing curly bracket and my semicolon. And I'm just going to disperse this across a few lines just so I can make this a little more readable. If I want to print my code out, it's going to fit on the printer a little bit better. So there is my hard-coded label array of temp codes. But I'm kind of assured that I didn't make any mistakes in typing out all these label names. Let the computer do the work. Now we're going to do a for loop. For int I equals 0, I is less than 52. Remember, we have elements from 0 to 51. I plus plus. We'll draw curly brackets. And now I want to populate the temp cards into my cards. So my cards sub I equals temp cards sub I. That's going to populate that array. Now I didn't name my button, my shuffle card button. It's just simply named button 1. Probably should have named it, but that's okay. We're only going to have 2 buttons here, so not a big deal. In the button 1 underscore click code, we're going to create a random object. I'm just going to call it R&D. It's going to equal new random. I'm going to make that a constructor method of the random class by putting the parentheses and a semicolon. That gives us our random object. I'm going to create a variable called int card value. We're going to set that equal to 0. I'm going to create a method called reset used cards. Now we're going to create that method. Remember that we have a Boolean array. Got a couple extra blank lines here we can get rid of. We have a Boolean array of card used. And we're going to set all of those values to be false in reset cards. So I'm going to create a method. Private void reset used cards. Not going to pass it anything. And inside that method, we'll use a for loop. Int I equals 0. I could say I is less than 53. Instead, I'm just going to say card used dot length, which would give us 53 values. So it's going to go from 0 to 52. And I plus plus. That way, if I wanted to ever increase this to maybe be 2 decks, I wouldn't have to change this code. In the for loop, we're simply going to say card used sub I equals false. Okay, that will reset all of those values to false in my Boolean array. I'm going to come back up to our button for the shuffle. In fact, I'm going to put a little comment here. This is the shuffle button, since I didn't name the button like I should have. So to shuffle all the cards, we're going to use a for loop with a do loop nested inside of that. The for loop will simply go through each of the labels, and then inside of that we'll use the do loop to make sure we don't use each card more than once. And that do loop, we're going to use the card used value to guarantee that. So let's start with our for loop. We'll do for int I equals 0. I is going to be less than. In this case, again, I'm going to use the length of my array for my cards this time. My cards dot length, and we'll increment I. Once again, I could double my deck or triple my deck, and it's not going to matter. I'm not changing this code. It would work for however many cards I have in my array. Okay, so there's our for loop. Inside of that, now we're going to do a do loop. We want the condition to be at the bottom of our do loop. Each time through this loop, we're going to generate a random number between 1 and 52 inclusive, and we're going to assign that to our integer variable named card value. So card value equals R&D dot next. We're going to pass it 52, which gives us a value between 0 and 51. And by adding 1, we'll get 1 to 52. At the end of that loop, we want to do a while. We're going to do this while our card used array for that particular element, whatever card value is true, meaning the card's already been used. Now, I don't have to put the equals true because card used sub card value actually is a true false statement or true false value because we set up as a Boolean array. But just for readability, I'm going to add the equals true. You can leave that out if you like. It's still going to work just fine. We need a semicolon here to end our while. At the end of that while, then we want to set the image of our label showing that card. So we'll do my cards sub I. The I is coming from our outer for loop. Dot image index equals card value. And that will display the card in our label. And then on the next line, we want to update card used. So we don't use that card again. Card used sub card value equals true. I'm going to get rid of this blank line here. Let's just test this. So I'm going to click Shuffle Deck. All my cards are populated. And you probably want to go through and make sure that each card is only used once. So let's take the spades. Here's the ace of spades, the two of spades, the three of spades. Got to find the four of spades, five of spades, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, jack. Looking for the queen of spades. There it is. And then the king. So all the spades are there. I'm going to do the same thing with the hearts, the diamonds, and the clubs and make sure it's all working. Notice we can click the Shuffle Deck button. It's going to reshuffle our deck each time very quickly. Okay. So let's code the Clear Deck button. I'm going to come back and go to my Form 1 design. I'm going to double click the Clear Deck button. So for the Clear Deck, once again, we're going to use another for loop. So for int I equals 0, I is less than my cards dot length. And again, I could have used a 52 here. We'll do I++, close our condition. And then in the loop, we're going to set each of the elements of my cards, so my card sub I dot image index to 0. So it's going to go through all the cards and show us the back of the card. Let's just test this. So I'm going to shuffle the deck. You can do that a few times. Click Clear Deck, and there's the back of the cards. So the next thing I want to do is to be able to click on any one of these cards and have our program show us which card was clicked. I'm going to drag the Properties panel up, just place here so you can see a little bit better. And I'm going to go to the Event area of our Properties panel. I'm going to select everything on the screen. This can get all 52 cards plus the 2 buttons. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and eliminate the 2 buttons. So we have the 52 cards. I'm going to come to the Click event. I'm going to type in Get Card as the method that each of these cards is going to utilize when we click on it. I'm going to deselect. Let's go back to our code. Here then is our Get Card method. Notice it's got a sender object and event args argument. It's got an object parameter of type sender and event args parameter that we've labeled E, or the computer's labeled E for us. And that sender, we want to use that, but right now it's an object, and we're going to specify that it should be a label. So we're going to create a pointer to that label named XYZ, and it's going to equal sender, but we need to cast sender as a label. So in essence, we're guaranteeing that sender is a label. And then we can use that XYZ, which will point to and be connected with whatever card we clicked on, which is sender. I'm going to create a variable called img IDX for image index, it's going to equal whatever the image index is for that card that we clicked on. Now that image index is a number, and we can use some mathematical formulas to figure out some values of that number as it relates to which suit and which face card it is. Remember, all of our images were in the order of all spades together from deuce to ace, then all hearts from deuce to ace, all diamonds from deuce to ace, and all clubs from deuce to ace. So we're going to create an integer called suit value, and it's going to equal img idx, and I'm going to divide that by 13. Since imgx is an integer and 13 is an integer, it's going to give us an integer division. I'm going to put a little note out here. This is an integer division. So it's going to give us basically a value from 0 to 3. I'm going to create another integer called face value, and I'm going to lowercase f. And I'm going to take img idx and do a modulus operation of 13. That's going to give us the remainder as we divide by 13, and that's going to allow us to determine whether this is, if there's no remainder, it's a 0, that means we hit the ace, and if there, say if we had the deuce, that'd be a remainder of 1. So 1 divided by 13, that's the ace of spades, that's the deuce of spades. If we had a king of spades, that's going to be element 12, and so our face value would be 12. Now we're going to create a couple more arrays. So I want a string array. I'm simply going to call this suits. Equals, and we'll put in some values here for our suits. So these are strings, each one enclosed in quotes: spades, hearts, diamonds, and clubs. Need a semicolon at the end of that line, and we're going to do the same thing for our face values. So string, we're going to just call it face as our array, and it's going to equal ace, deuce, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth. I'm going to pull my properties back down. We no longer need that. In fact, just to make this a little more readable, let's bring this down to the next line. Jack, queen, and king. And I need a semicolon. I'm going to clean up my spelling a little bit here, make sure everything is correct. Ace, deuce, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, jack, queen, king. Because the ace is at the end of our graphic displays, we went from deuce to ace, but the ace is at the beginning of our string values. So if we do a modulus operation by 13 and it's 0, it becomes element 0. I need to move the ace forward 1 suit. So our value here, I'm going to do that with an if statement. So if face value equals 0, meaning it came up as an ace, then I want to take suit value and decrement it by 1. And then if our image index equals 0, that means it's the back of the card. So I want to test for that, and if that's the case, we're going to bring up a message box, and we're going to tell the user you clicked an unrevealed card. Let's give it a title of unknown. So it's only going to be if they clicked on a back of a card. And we'll do an else fork here. And in the else fork, we're going to build a string. I'm going to call that string prompt. So it's a string variable named prompt. It's going to equal, it's going to be you clicked the, I'm going to put a space after the, close my literal string. We're going to add to that our face array of element face value. So that might be the 10, that might be the deuce, might be the ace. And we're a literal string then with space of space. Concatenate to that our suits array using the suit value index and a semicolon to end the statement. Then we'll add our message box command using the show method. We're going to provide our prompt, and let's give it a title of you picked a card. And finish that out with a semicolon. So this will display the information in a message box of which card they picked. Let's give this a try. So I got a build error saying that a curly bracket was expected. I'm going to click no and figure out where that curly bracket is missing. It's in line 88. So somewhere along the way I lost a curly bracket. I'm just going to add one in here. But now let's build it again. Okay, so we're going to shuffle the deck. We'll do this a few times. And then if I click a card, it says I clicked the deuce of spades. Ace of diamonds. I want to make sure all the aces work. Ace of clubs, ace of hearts, ace of spades. So I made sure the beginning card worked, deuce of spades, and the ace of clubs, which would have been the last card in our mix. And everything else in between should be working just fine. So 7 of hearts, this one should be the 8 of hearts. Let's try the 4 of diamonds. Queen of hearts. Probably want to do the first card in my test as a minimum, and the last cards. We did the queen and the 8. And I'm just going to shuffle the deck one more time. Just click a card at random. Let's do the jack of clubs, and that works. So it is shuffling the deck, it is clearing the deck, and it is allowing me then to choose a card and tell which card was chosen. That is our shuffle deck project.